Hello and welcome to the Southbound Sports Show. I'm your host, Rich Leahy, here with my co-hosts, Maddie B. and Rick David. I just want to say, last week, Periscope cut the show short. So if you're watching at home and you're interested, we do an actual audio podcast version. So head over to iTunes, Google Play, TuneIn. I believe we're on Stitcher. Search for the Southbound Sports Show and subscribe. You get the full audio there every week. I also post the video, full video, even if it goes on Periscope. You can get the full video on our YouTube. Had a couple of subscribers for that. So thank you if you followed. And anyone else, feel free to go ahead and do that. We really appreciate it. This week, we're going to go ahead and kick it off with high tempo. My topic this week, before we get started, is going to be the MLS, Major League Soccer. I saw today that the Columbus Crew are already thinking of relocating. They've only been a franchise for a few years and they want to go to Austin, Texas. To me, that's basically suicide for your franchise. They already have one of the best fan bases and they're already considering going ahead and relocating. The MLS is barely profitable compared to the other leagues. It's ludicrous. It's everything that's wrong with sports. You're going to go ahead, move one of your franchises while they're already looking to expand. It's just not fair to other cities. You've seen it whenever the Rams left St. Louis. You leave a city who already built a stadium for you, and you keep asking for more and more. It has to stop. So that's my topic for this week. I really hope they don't move, but it's already going to be hurting them because I've already seen a couple people reach out, try to get some info on fans, and people are already canceling their season tickets because there's no loyalty. They've already went through it with the Browns leaving Cleveland, and Ohio fans, they deserve better than that. Ohio has a great fan base for all sports. So go ahead, Matt. What's your high tempo topic for this week?
I was looking and was very surprised to see the Giants pick up their first win of the season over Denver 23-10. And I love the fact that in spite of losing every single one of the receivers, they were 4 wide receivers, they still managed to put together enough offense to get the win. And I think it just shows you when you're a football team that just focuses on doing the little things right, protecting the ball, not, complaining about who's getting the ball and when they're getting it. It just goes to show that when you're working and you put that time in, it pays off on the field. So snaps to the Giants for getting that first win on the year.
Cool. I know they're supposed to be a defensive-sounded team, and with an experienced quarterback like Eli Manning, it sucks to have injuries just derail your season. But we'll go ahead. Rick, what about you? High tempo.
Mine is on the MLB. I know the conspiracy theorists are out there. I think we were one of the first ones to put it out there. Your 4 biggest markets in Major League Baseball are your 4 teams that are left in your MLB playoffs. Not surprising at all 4 teams are very, very good. And it shows you, especially with the Cubs, the Astros, and the Yankees, I'll throw all 3 of them, you got to build from within. Look at their rosters. Look how many guys came up to their minor league systems. Look at what they have done. I can remember one time I was getting told by the living legend, Clearfield, PA owned, Doug Brokaw, him, Craig Biggio, Jeff Bagwell were all sent to the minor leagues to every level and to ask how many of these Astro minor leaguers, after all 3 retired together pretty much within a year, saying, hey, how many guys out of these minor leagues do you think are going to make it to the majors? And literally Doug Brokaw said 3. Bagwell said 4. Biggio said 3. And they all had the same 3. They were off on one guy. It shows you your minor league stinks when those 3 living legends who put in 15 years experience all to the major league said your minor league stink. What happened? They cleaned house, got new scouts, got a bunch of minor leaguers that could play, they could teach them up, and now look at them. They're in the Final 4. Now it's tied 2-2. They lost today. But it looks and tells you what happens. Team went through a downfall. Why? Their minor league stunk. Team's coming back. Why? They had a strong minor leagues and good prospects.
Yeah, and I'm going to build on that because our first topic is going to be the MLB playoffs today. I did do the research. I sent it to you guys. I think I actually put it on Twitter, so follow us, S-Bound Sports, on Twitter. If you can get some of the breaking news and stuff that I put out there and some of the other guys. But what I was looking at were the 4 biggest markets. When you saw Cleveland, they went on the huge winning streak. I mentioned it before. I knew they were going to burn out. I put that out there as well. And you just can't win and go on the hot streaks. So everything was lined up perfectly as long as the other series broke. Washington choked once again. And you're left with the 4 biggest markets, or at least cities population-wise. It's no surprise that New York has multiple teams in every professional sports league. LA, the same boat. There's a reason Chicago has 2 Major League Baseball teams. It's because they have the most people there. So this is like a Major League Baseball wet dream right now. And it would be interesting to see, or it's going to be interesting when I try to put together some TV numbers. So I'll be putting those out in the future. I just want to see how it compares to past years where you had the smaller markets in. You had the Tampa Bay Rays making it. You had a smaller Kansas City market go all the way. And now you have basically your behemoths this year. And as long as those series go, if they're not going to be blowouts, Rick mentioned Houston and the Yankees are 2-2. I think the other one is similar. I can't remember what it was, but you just have 2 big series, and their major dream, or whatever, I know what the MLB wants. They want the Yankees versus the Dodgers. It just has to happen. That's what they want. I wouldn't be surprised. I know a lot of Cubs have a lot of national fans across the country because of their television deal, where the Chicago network was broadcast. I know up and down the East Coast, I could have watched any Cubs game I wanted growing up. I can still, here in North Carolina, I get more Cubs games than I do any other team, just because it's on the national network. So it's going to be interesting to see. The NL doesn't really matter as much. There is a big swing more if New York gets in compared to Houston. So I wonder if there's any close calls or anything. It's kind of harder to do that in baseball unless you're doing balls and strikes. So watch that K zone. See what happens. If there's an ace on the mound, you might see a tighter strike zone. Just trying to get that call in to get the Yankees to advance. I wouldn't be surprised. I hate to be a conspiracy guy. I never was. But when you're looking at base numbers like this, it's just going to break that way. So, Matt, do you have any thoughts on baseball?
Just looking forward to seeing Verlander pitch later this week. He's helping keep Houston afloat, and that's just kind of the player that I've been watching. Just because it seems like every time he comes out, he brings a lot of oomph to it. So I'll just keep following along, seeing how they do.
It's good to see a player like that. I know Detroit wasn't going to compete, and it's good to see a player that is well respected and competes 100%, go to a contender and get a chance to win that ring. Rick, you have any other thoughts on baseball you want to add in this week?
I mean, Houston Yankees are going to go back to Houston, so I think that's going to play a little bit into their favor there. Verlander is pitching. He's probably the best starter out of that American League between Yankees and Houston. He's their best starter, so it's great it's going to be good to see him go out there and especially pitch for a team that's winning. Detroit's going to be one of these teams. Red Sox are now looking for coaches, but I mean, Houston, I still like their offense. I like the way they play. I think they got a good bullpen. I was suspect of Ken Giles, and today he was the one who blew the game. But I'm still liking them overall. I think Yankees are going to be there year in and year out now, just because of their talent. Cubs Schwarber just hit a home run, so Cubs are leading in that game right now. So, but it wouldn't surprise me. I still think the Cubs have a pretty good team. They were my pick to go back to the World Series, so I got to kind of stay with them. But they still have a good roster and everything. So I know people knock their bullpen. I think it's still better than what you think. I just don't think it's as good because last year they had Chapman, this year they don't. So.
Yeah, I wonder if that Chapman loss is going to go ahead and swing some of these games, or at least make the fans a little bit more nervous going into that late innings. But this week, going to transition now into the NHL. I put it on here, kind of just a quick check-in. It's tough to get into the NHL this time of year whenever there's so many football games on, but it has been Pittsburgh's most successful sport. So I'm going to try to put it on each show just to check in. We talked about last week they gave up the 10 goals to Chicago. Penguins are actually in second place right now, although they're tied 3-3 at the start of this show with the Rangers, and the Rangers are just awful. So the Penguins have just been inconsistent. Overall, the goal differential, they're -5. But I'm not too worried because you get a playoff team. My only concern is whenever you have a deep playoff run, you're playing basically through June. It's tough to get the rest and kind of get into game shape because that offseason's so condensed. So I'm hoping that the Penguins are able just to keep winning a few games, not get too worn out here earlier in the year, and then try to get a groove and get things rolling in January come February. And as long as they're in the top of standings, that's cool with me. So no worries right now. Whenever you have your biggest stars back, I think they'll be fine, even though that goal differential's down. Mainly that's only because of that one game. Matt, have you watched any hockey? Want to touch on the Penguins or anything?
I just think going into the second week here, you're kind of seeing some of the early panic of the beginning part of the year where fans were saying, the sky is falling because they've lost so many players. You're starting to kind of see the players getting back into a routine. The Pens are playing a little bit more consistent hockey. It shows in their overall record, and for the time of year, it's exactly what we wanted from them. So no complaints here. Like you said, I like the fact that they're at the top part of the division, which is where they should be, being that they still have a lot of their core players there. It's just settling some of the pairings for the power play and just figuring out who's going to be playing best with who.
Yeah, Rick, what are your thoughts? You have anything?
I mean, the Penguins are going to still be there when it comes down to it. They do need to get a backup goaltender. Nenamini is not the answer. He's awful. He was awful with Dallas. He's still awful. That's the reason why they got rid of him. That's the reason why they brought in Ben Bishop there to be the starter. That's what it is. I will say that. I'm still surprised at Vegas. Vegas is 4-1 today. They are going to go play Buffalo here later. Buffalo was one of my teams I thought would be great, especially with getting a new manager, or a new head coach. But they have just been awful. 1-4 this year. Vander Kane's done well, but the rest of the team has struggled massively. Thought they would be better, not as good. Hall of Famer as your head coach, and he's not doing it. Jack Eichel gets rid of Dan Belsma, Penguin guy, gets rid of him pretty much, says he doesn't want to be there, gets rid of him, gets Housley, gets an extension. Nothing much has changed their cellar dwellers. So, but I do wish the best of luck to Vegas. Fleury is now injured. He's on the IR, but they're still doing it with a half-decent roster. Really, your biggest stars are Fleury, Neal, and Perron. Nothing big on that team, but they're still doing it. So, but the West is out there for anybody's grabbing. So, I mean, there's a lot of teams that are underachieving. Sharks are awful out there right now. Jones has not looked good in net. So, the West could be up for grabs. So,
yeah, it looks like the West is going to be a crapshoot, at least early on. It's good to see Vegas getting some run. So we'll have to keep an eye on them. And hopefully the East will crown a champion for the Stanley Cup once again, and hopefully it will be our Pittsburgh Penguins. But we're going to go ahead and transition now into the start of a little bit of college talk. I'm trying to break up the college football into more manageable pieces because we kind of talk about the same conferences, teams a little bit. Sometimes we get out. And if you have any feedback on the format, let me know. I know football has kind of been a block on the show. I want to do more topics and kind of keep the show engaging. So any feedback is appreciated. This first one, though, isn't football related. It's basically sanction related, academic related, basketball related. And that is the University of North Carolina versus the NCAA. And being here in Raleigh, I'm close to the situation. And I was actually down here in a neighboring city whenever this news first broke. So if you're not familiar, I'll kind of give you the recap from the academic perspective. North Carolina put together an African American Studies degree. I think it was abbreviated AFAM, where they would have college athletes enroll and they would take what are considered paper classes. So you would sign up for the class, you wouldn't meet, there's no teacher. You would come in and your only project for the year was a paper. And I've sent it out a couple different times. I've even sent it out this week through the Southbound Sports account to people who were saying that UNC did nothing wrong or the classes were legit. They weren't legit. It doesn't matter if the NCAA ruled that there were no penalties. UNC has been sanctioned, and they were on probation from their accreditation board. Their accreditation is through the Southern Association of Colleges or something. It's abbreviation as SACS, SACS or something like that. So if you look that up and say like UNC on academic probation, they have been actually already. The facts are there. They've already been. I don't want to say penalized because it didn't actually affect sports, which is what we're about. But they have been proven that these classes were fake. So they've been on the academic probation. It's already been out there. So the NCAA, they kind of, after the accreditation board came in and said they were fake, because the NCAA came in first. I think it was 2008, 2009. This has been going on forever. They kind of gave a slap on the wrist to the football program. And when the accreditation looked into it, they said, this is more widespread than what you think. And SAC said, yeah, I think they had an external investigation through Weinstein. So you can read that report where he said that there was 300 students that actually participated in these classes. So it's been an ongoing war. UNC has said that the NCAA has no jurisdiction here. They were already on academic probation, and the classes, they said, were open to anybody. The actual first student who brought this to the attention of the NCAA was Rashad McCants, who was on the 2005 UNC national championship team. He said that he can't get a job now because his degree is worthless. When he goes to interview for a job, they just kind of laugh at him. And he knows that it's true because a lot of jobs, if you're trying to get it in academic range or whatever, if he's trying to get into a college, you have to submit your transcripts. They see that he's in these fake classes and they just laugh and kick him out. He can't get a job now. So a lot of people have said NCAA needs to step in here. These are athletes who can't get jobs. So they've looked into this. It's taken forever. And finally, after UNC threatened legal lawsuits, they were going to have the state of North Carolina sue the NCAA for whatever overstepping their bounds and trying to get into the academic side of their college. The NCAA finally ruled that the classes, I think the statement actually said the classes were probably fake, but we can't do anything here, so there's not going to be any sanctions. So they kind of get off scot-free. I feel bad for McCants and any of the other players. I believe that I'm saying his name right. I hope I have the right player. But he stepped up. A couple other papers have leaked. So if you're interested, go on our Twitter. I've posted it a couple times, or search UNC Rosa Parks paper, because I've seen a false narrative come out where people are saying these are 25-page papers that these students had to write. They weren't. This athlete wrote a 146-word embarrassment for a college level, and he got an A-. If I would have wrote that in 8th grade, I would have failed. So I feel bad for the players. I have an education background. I don't care about the fake titles or whatever they hang. UNC even hangs a Helms banner. Who the hell hangs a Helms banner? Anyone doesn't even know what that is. But the fact that these guys are getting screwed out of an education, that hurts more than anything else. So I'll step back and let you guys talk if you guys have anything on the scandal. Matt, I know you were down here with me at that time. Do you have any thoughts on the scandal?
The main thing that I have, and we've talked about this at length during other episodes, but it's the inconsistencies. You have where there's evidence, it's clearly documented that there were these issues with the classes, and not just a class or two, but a whole program, and there's no consequence for it. But then you look at, if they're going to free that up and they're going to just say, then it's okay, then fair is fair. Give wins back to other programs. Give national championships and Heismans and everything else, and just give it all back. And then just start with a clean slate. Establish yourself some clear ground rules for what you're going to determine things by, and go from there. Or if you have no precedent, at least start to say, if we're with whatever evidence that they have, whether it's that they don't want to come down on a program that, when it comes to basketball, is going to generate revenue for the NCAA, whatever their rationale is for letting this slide, they need to get a handle on it, because it's going to look awful when nothing is done here. And to use an example, let's just say that some kind of penalty down the line were to happen at Florida State. There's nothing that says that they have to abide by what the NCAA policy is now, because UNC's already established the precedent that you could just do whatever you want and it really doesn't matter, because NCAA said they were gonna sanction them. Nothing. It's like, if you take them to court, you fight it long enough, and you're willing to put the money behind it, it'll go away. They'll just let it go. Once the immediate blowback from social media dies off, then it's like, all right, well, then we really don't care. We'll back off on it, and you can just do whatever you want to do, and it doesn't matter. Basically, the message that NCAA said there was that regardless of what happens, they don't care. As long as they're going to pay and fight it, so be it. And I just think that's wrong.
Yeah, and I know we have talked about like the Florida State sanctions and stuff like that. You can't slap one program. It wasn't even a slap on the wrist for UNC. It was nothing. It wasn't even a scolding. It was kind of just like oh, okay. Yeah, you told me a lie. I know you're lying. It's kind of like a kid. He comes back to his classroom. Teacher catches him in a lie. And he says, yeah, I lied or whatever. Actually, UNC did say, if you read through the latest, they actually admitted that it was fraud in an email. They responded to the NCAA and said that was a typo. Who makes that kind of mistake? Who makes a typo admitting fraud and then saying that was a typo? And the NCAA kind of just like turns a blind eye to that. But whatever. Yeah, you're right. There has to be some kind of separation. And I'd like to get your thoughts on this, Rick. Since Penn State was hit with sanctions for something else that wasn't in NCAA's jurisdiction then. If they're going to let this go, they should never have penalized Penn State. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, and they eventually gave back some of the things to Penn State over time. So, which was some players got their records back, which they deserve. There are certain things that are out of the players' abilities, and they lose it, like the rushing awards. I can't remember what Penn State running back was. He's like, "Dang, I have no rushing yards in college now." He goes, "I guess I did nothing, but somehow I play in the NFL." It was one of the ones that was in the top 10 that said it. So, I mean, it's kind of, I don't get it. I don't understand the NCAA. I don't think I will ever, even if I keep studying them and studying what they do. It doesn't, I don't get it. But because here's the thing, they open themselves up, first off, that other schools can do this because you're not punishing them. I think now you're going to have more schools pushing the boundaries of what can I do and get away with. What are they going to look at? What are they not going to look at? Okay, they may not look at these classes. I remember it was years ago, and I can't remember. It was one of the assistant coaches in college basketball was teaching a class, and the one question was, it was Georgia, I think it was. And the assistant coach taught a class, one of the questions on the test was, how many points is a three-point shot? And I remember just being like, what the heck is this? They got punished for it, but North Carolina doesn't. So I don't know. It's weird. I don't get it. Some schools can get punished a lot. Some don't. Who knows? But I guess if you're willing to fight it, you can do anything. See Ezekiel Elliott today. If you're willing to fight it, you can do it. And I think that's the problem with sports, especially with the NCAA. If you're willing to fight it, you get it. You can get your way, which is ridiculous to think that way, but whatever, it is what it is. I personally thought when you heard the possibility of Penn State, I first thought the death penalty's coming back. Since it hasn't been used really since SMU days when they were really paying players. But, so I thought they were going to come back in the death penalty, and they didn't get the death penalty. So that's why I always ask the question. You have these repeat offenders for either programs or coaches. Patino's one. I mean, I don't understand why you can't use the death penalty against coaches. It's like, okay, you did questionable things here, there, and you're still doing it. Why don't we just death penalty you, and you could go coach in developmental NBA, or you can go coach in the NBA again for Boston again, and tell me about Larry Bird not being able to walk through the doors and that he'd be old. So I don't get it. So,
well, that's one of the points I wanted to bring up when you said about the coaches. There's actually a rumor that that's why Chip Kelly hasn't been hired. He has a show clause against him because Oregon, whenever he left Oregon, if you remember, they were caught paying recruits to steer guys. I think it was in Texas or California. So he was actually busted. The NCAA gave him a show clause. And if you're not familiar with the NCAA rules are, if you're a coach for any university, it doesn't matter if it's the same one. He got pinched at Oregon. It's tied to his name. If he coaches for an NCAA institution, they can reopen that case. And because he's a member and he's getting a paycheck through like the NCAA institution or whatever the rules are, they could interview him. It was kind of like the court. But because he's not a coach, they can't touch him. And by extension, Oregon. So keep an eye on that. If Chip Kelly comes back, I don't know what the year limit is because I believe Jim Tressel has the same show clause on him too because they wanted more dirt on Ohio State. He's actually the president of Youngstown State or something. So as long as he's not a coach or part of like the NCAA, he can get away from it. Now, I think Jim Tressel's is up. And that's where there's rumors.
AD, though.
Go ahead, Matt.
I thought he was AD. I thought he was the athletic director at Youngstown State. Maybe I'm wrong there, but I thought that he was the athletic director. But it was interesting that you brought up about the Penn State issues as well, because when it came to some of that, they were self-reporting and they were self-punishing themselves along the way. And then in addition to that, NCAA came down on them. So I think one of the other things that you're going to see as a result of this UNC ruling is there's no incentive for teams to do the right thing. If they catch something like this in-house, there's no way you go to the NCAA with it. There's no way. You just address it in-house and pretend like it, you handle it internally and you never report it, because otherwise they're going to bring the house down on you.
Well, I'll say this. The other thing I wanted to bring up, I think that this might be like the end of the NCAA. And I've been hearing a couple different things. I actually heard before this ruling was pushed back a week. And UNC kind of said that they didn't want it announced the previous week because they had a big fundraising opportunity, which made it seem like they were going to get penalized. So something happened in that week, because if you were going to get off scot-free, why would you want that announcement pushed back a week? You're just hurting recruiting. It doesn't make any sense. So I've heard that there were 5 universities that if this happened where there was no penalty, that are getting their states' legislation together to kind of countersue the NCAA. I don't know who they were. I kind of have a guess. My first thought would be UConn. If you remember UConn, they weren't allowed to participate in the NCAA tournament because their grades didn't meet the NCAA standards, which is an academic issue, which the NCAA just said that they can't rule on. So they could counteractively. I don't know if that affects like funding or anything, but that's one. The second would be Louisville, because they're screwed right now. I would have to imagine it's them, possibly Syracuse, because they were kind of in a similar situation. I think they've kind of skated around it. The one that I've heard loudly most recently, I think, is Ole Miss with their problems. They've already said that if the state legislation has to get on board, if they're going to hurt the school, some of their biggest moneymakers, then they're going to have to fight back. And right now, let's say that happens. Ole Miss, if you don't remember, they had the video of their draft pick. He was smoking a bong or a gas mask bong or something. And they had text messages of him receiving payments from coaches. So what's to say that Ole Miss doesn't say, well, that's a rogue coach or that's so-and-so, whatever. I think they already fired their head coach for that other text message thing that they talked about. But now you have the precedent where as long as you just ignore it and you don't self-penalize yourself, I find it hard to believe that the NCAA is going to step in and actually do something. Looks like I might have lost the guys here, but we'll see if we can get them back on. But that's what I'm looking at here with the UNC versus NCAA. The one thing I brought it up with Chip Kelly, I hear a lot of rumors that he's going to be back on as a coach. But if that's the truth, if he actually can't get a job because he's still under that show cause penalty, I don't see any coach or any team that would go ahead and take a chance on him. Now, Jim Tressels is up. I've heard his name floated around a few universities. One of the biggest ones that I'm going to use to transition into college football here is the Nebraska job. So the Nebraska job isn't open yet, but they fired their athletic director. Nebraska actually hired the athletic director from Washington State. So they hired the athletic director from Washington State, and they went ahead and they brought back, I'm going to see if I can get these guys back on here, but they hired the athletic director from Washington State, and they've said on the record that they're not going to go ahead and try to bring in Mike Leach. The athletic director at Washington State hired Mike Leach. He took a chance on him because Mike Leach got pushed out at Texas Tech. Everyone knows, if you listen to this show, I'm high on Mike Leach. I think he's a great coach. And so now
Richie, I'm back.
Yeah, I told the guys, I just kept talking on the sanctions, and I transitioned into football. I know I don't have Pac-12 on the docket, but I'm getting into the transitions kind of like in the Big Ten a little bit with that, the penalty stuff. So the athletic director for Nebraska, they fired their coach. They brought in the athletic director from Washington State. I think I let you guys know. I don't know if Rick's having issues because I don't think he got back on, so it might just be me and you right now. But I don't think that, well, Mike Leach already came out and squashed the rumor saying that he wasn't going to come to Nebraska, but that's one of the ones where I've heard the Jim Tressel thing come up, where possibly he's a kind of pro. He's not old school pro offense, but he's modern enough that it might work at Nebraska. I mean, he had great success at Ohio State. If his show cause penalties actually up, that's where I heard the rumor that that's the reason he hasn't been touched, and he's actually president of Youngstown State and not the AD. I don't know if he was AD for some time or what that transition was. They're also a different division too, so that might have something to play with it. I think they're either Division 2 or their football subdivision, the playoff one.
Subdivision.
So I don't know if that's something, but that's where I've heard it. Mike Riley's still at Nebraska, but whenever you don't have fans happy and you're bringing in a new athletic director, it doesn't spell good for him. Mike Leach, awful loss last week, and I'm going to use this to segue into ACC football. Clemson, too, awful loss. We had a lot of top 10 teams lose. The Pac-12 doesn't look like they're in a good spot right now. They really need USC to beat Notre Dame. They really need that to happen. I think they play this week. And actually, Penn State and Michigan, the last time Penn State and Michigan and USC and USC and Notre Dame played on the same exact weekend was the weekend of the last second Manningham touchdown and the Bush push. So that's a little random fact for you guys. Look that up. I think it was all the way back in 2002 or 2005. Crazy weekend of games. I think that same weekend, Wisconsin blocked a punt and took it to the house to beat Minnesota. So that's a crazy weekend. So just a little bit of fact. Maybe we'll have some other spooky upsets this weekend. But that's what I'm looking at. Getting into ACC football, Clemson lost. And that was a bad loss because they were playing Syracuse. I've actually seen people down here talking in Raleigh that they still think the ACC is going to get two teams into the playoffs. That's not going to happen. If Clemson doesn't win the conference, like they're saying that Clemson could lose the ACC championship game and still get in because they're ranked 7th, the committee will look at that Syracuse loss and be like, no, you're out. No one has ever lost to a team like that and made the playoffs. Every team that has a loss has lost to someone that's respectable. Ohio State lost to Virginia Tech. Last year, who did some of the other ones lose to? Clemson. Well, Clemson lost to Pitt. So I guess maybe, but I would say Pitt's program historically is better than Syracuse. Syracuse is like a pure basketball school. They haven't been relevant in football in 50, 60 years. It's almost as bad as losing to Rutgers. So, Matt, I'll let you get on. I'll try to get Rick back on here. What are your thoughts on ACC football from the past weekend?
Well, to be honest, it was the same old same as far as Florida State's concerned. It's kind of just getting used to the high drama now. I saw some stats on Tomahawk Nation that they broke down that their offense is one of the slowest offensive teams in college football. That the amount of time that they spend per play, it's one of the slowest moving offenses. And then when you combine that with the fact that they don't go for it on fourth down often. Like when you look at some of these teams that run the triple option, like Georgia Tech and Navy, they kind of put themselves in positions where they can kind of move forward because they know on third down they're trying to get half the yardage to go for it on fourth. A lot of times fourth down rolls around and it's automatic field goal, it's automatic punt. There's no thoughts on are they going to go for it or not? You know that they're not. It's like the most conservative play calling. And then Jimbo goes out in his post-game conferences and will complain about teams that are running the RPOs and doing these things to push a little bit of tempo. It's like with the talent that you have, you should be willing to and you should be able to adjust accordingly. Don't complain about the way that the refs are calling games or the rules and things like that. Make the changes. I think looking at it from a different perspective, my wife made the comment that this is one of the first times that you watching the games and that things can be a little bit closer. In years past, it's been either a complete blowout one way or the other, and this year, you already have two games that have gone down to the wire. So I think from that, it's been a little bit more interesting. But when you're accustomed to playing well, it can be frustrating. I think NC State with if they can continue doing what they're doing, I don't see a reason why they can't potentially finish out the year and be a possible playoff-bound team. I think when you really look at the conferences like the SEC that were able to pull in two teams in the past, what ends up having to happen is you get your hiccups out of the way now, and then by the time late season hits, you got to just start steamrolling teams. The way that Ohio State backed into the playoffs that year, a couple years ago, they absolutely came out and just pounded. I think it was Wisconsin, or they ran the score up on whoever it was right before the selection show. So, and I remember like we were texting back and forth. I said they're going to push themselves into the playoffs because there was the 2 or 3 team tie. It was like, well, what's going to separate one from another? And it was the fact that Ohio State just scored like 60 some points, right before it came time for the playoff committee to meet, and that resounding win stood out to them as a reason to put them in over some of the other teams. Other than that, I felt like it was this college football season in general, just it seems so off because you don't have, a per se top tier. It's like any week, a potential top team, with the exception of Alabama, runs the risk of being knocked off. And so you really do have to, the games do matter. And it's going to be interesting to see, because this may be the year that you see a 2 or even 3 potentially lost team make the playoffs.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's where, like I was mentioning about the ACC media down here thinking they're going to get 2 teams in. You're right. NC State is in a great position, and they actually have a key game at Notre Dame. This is one of the rare seasons where Notre Dame is a key team, because they lost to Georgia by, I think it was 1 point at home, and Georgia's undefeated right now. So it's looking like both Georgia and Alabama could potentially be in the playoffs. Alabama has looked great, but the SEC has looked so bad that if they hadn't played Florida State this year, they could be at the potential of right now being the weakest undefeated team. And I could see everyone putting Georgia ahead of them. But because that Florida State win is so high, then you have teams like Auburn losing to LSU. LSU lost to Troy, and now they beat Florida. I made fun of their coach on here. They beat Florida, and then they come back and beat Auburn. Unbelievable. I think what happened is the SEC lost their great coaches. Coaches left. Some of them got in scandals or whatever, and now they're just down. And whenever that happens, yeah, you could potentially get 2 teams in the playoffs. Luckily, with Alabama's talent, they're probably not going to be a one and done. They're probably advanced if they're playing a weaker team. And that will make the conference look good. and I don't know how long that will last in the long run. Then you have, on the other hand, a conference like the Pac-12 where USC's taken some hits and Washington and Washington State both lose. So now you were looking like it was going to be an awesome Apple Cup. I brought it up last week, and now they're out. So the ACC is looking at these other conferences, and yeah, it's theirs for the taking. Clemson lost. Yeah, it was to Syracuse, but in the overall grand scheme of things, it might not be that bad because they're the ones that are looking like they might be playing an undefeated Miami in the ACC championship game. If not, if they lose to NC State or something, NC State could be in there with that same thing. Yeah, they have a loss to South Carolina. The SEC hasn't looked that good, but if they get that win against Notre Dame, that could push them in. This is also the year, like you said, a two-loss team. This is where we're really going to see the value of Notre Dame, because potentially Notre Dame could be 10-2. They won't have that conference championship. Or are they going to put another two-loss team in over Notre Dame, or are they going to try to get Notre Dame into the playoffs for the first time? That's where you're going to see, and I know a lot of other conferences have to shake out before that. But right now, really excited down here in Raleigh to see NC State doing well. I honestly thought that Pitt game was going to be their trap game. They always have one big letdown game, and maybe it's not going to happen. I don't know. They kind of let Pitt hang around, but then they just had more talent. And for a long time, NC State didn't have that. So Doran's building a good program, it looks like. I don't think it's to the point where it's going to be crazy where they should start extending his contract. I know that seems to happen. Once a team starts to finally do well, they think, we got to lock this guy up. You kind of have to let it ride. I would hate to see that happen. One of the reasons I brought that up is you have the Louisville clause. Bobby Petrino, they're going through all their stuff. If they fire the AD, his buyout drops in half. So I think it goes from $8 million to $4 million. So that's another key team to look at in the ACC. Right now, it's Lamar Jackson or bust for Louisville. If he's gone, will an SEC team pull him back in? Look at how Arkansas has done since he left. So that's one of the themes that I want to look for. Rick, are you back on?
Yeah, I'm back on. Somehow I don't have your video and you don't have mine.
I have your video. So you're good.
What? Oh, you can? I can't see you. So,
all right.
But
we're talking ACC football. You have any thoughts on the ACC?
Not so much. Mine's more on overall, just because I think this is Miami's probably going to win. TCU's probably going to win. So a lot of your undefeated or teams that haven't been beaten yet are going to stay. Alabama is playing somebody super weak. They're going to win. So out of your top 25, a lot of them are probably, if you're undefeated teams, are going to stay undefeated. I don't see Notre Dame winning this week. I think USC goes there and wins. That puts Notre Dame in a two-loss team. So I think that's going to be something to figure in. But maybe Syracuse could pull two upsets and somehow beats Miami. I don't see how they're going to do that. But, we still have, like I said, TCU's out there undefeated. Penn State will have the whiteout as usual. College Game Day will be showing up there. So I will say that. So that hopefully they pull the trick and finally win it. And I still look at South Florida is going to play Tulane. They're probably going to win, but it is an away game for them. So I think a lot of your undefeated teams stay undefeated this week. So it's still figuring in. I don't think a two-loss team gets in. I think it's going to be one. The other one is Maryland goes to Wisconsin, too. So Maryland's already pulled an upset over Texas this year. So can they do it twice?
And the 19th string quarterback.
Yeah. And Pitt doesn't play in second half.
Every year. No, they don't. How the hell does Miami or Maryland always end up going with a 19th string quarterback? I feel like this is every year now. They got what do they put, paper mache back at quarterback? It's every time you turn around, you almost feel sorry for them because they don't have a first string quarterback. It's one thing to have that happen one year, but it's they're having random drawings to see who's going to quarterback for Maryland this week. Are they not recruiting offensive linemen? I don't follow Maryland football enough to understand what's going on, but I know that there's a serious problem where every single year when you're going through your second, third, and fourth string quarterback because people keep getting injured, there's some kind of issue going on in the program.
Well, it's funny you brought that up because I actually saw an interesting project where some Maryland fans were trying to compare injury rates for teams that are wearing Under Armour gear. Because Maryland has been on Under Armour for so long, and you're right, they always have some type of problem, so they're wondering if it's something with the cleats, if that's why they're having so many knee injuries, and is that something where it's kind of just like a freak? Because it could also be due to overtraining with the wait staff. But yeah, it's something that should be looked at. And we can kind of use this as a segue into the Big Ten football talk. But Matt, first, before I get into the Maryland thing a little bit deeper, what do you think of talking about Notre Dame during the ACC football segment? Do you think that's annoying? Because I don't know how ACC fans feel about having, like, I don't want to inject Notre Dame. And this is for the other fans too. If you hate it, send me a message. We don't have to talk about Notre Dame. But I think it's interesting because it's going to play a role because they have those 5 ACC games. It's going to shape the ACC's role in the playoffs. What are your thoughts?
Notre Dame is Notre Dame. I mean, I think if you look at it from a business standpoint, it helps to have those games because they're going to draw the crowds and you'll get the gate from having Notre Dame come to town. You could put them on the moon, you could put them on a deserted island, and fans would show up. So, I mean, from that end, it is beneficial to have them on the schedule. They've reaped the benefits of it over the last couple of years because Notre Dame has dropped so many games that it's kind of been helpful that you go there, you get the ticket crowd, and you get the win. But it looks like they're starting to fix whatever issues were going on there. They're off to a decent start. It hasn't actually played itself out yet where they push one of the ACC teams out. And I know you've commented on it before where you look at, do they push one of those schools out for, one of the New Year's 5 bowls? It's to be determined to see if they take that place. But, as of right now, it really hasn't affected a whole lot. So I'm curious just to see it run its course first and then kind of assess where they're at. I know it's tough to say because they should be in a conference. If you're aligning with an ACC schedule and you're playing ACC and other sports, they should just be straight up and down. It shouldn't be where you get to say, well, we're our own entity for football, but then for everything else, we'll align to a conference. I don't agree to that, and I wish that they would just hold true, for all sports.
Well, the reason I brought that up is you're looking at a doomsday scenario for the ACC in regards to a champion. If, let's say, NC State loses at Notre Dame, their 2 losses are out of conference. They beat Clemson. The rest of their schedule looks like a cakewalk, which is never a sure thing for NC State fans. So I'm not trying to put the jinx on here. I'm just stating some facts. They should be favored in the rest of their games. They upset Clemson. It is at home. I've actually been to an NC State Clemson game. 2011, they knocked off number 8 Clemson. It's happened before. They almost beat them last year. They missed a field goal, which would have essentially knocked Clemson out of the playoffs in a year they won the national championship. If that happens, you're looking at a 10-2 or whatever the record would end up being, maybe 12-2. But they're going to be a 2-loss ACC champion. Do they get in the playoffs? Would, in that scenario, maybe they beat Miami in the ACC championship game. That's Miami's first loss. They've never actually put a championship game loser into the playoffs. They have put a team, Ohio State, that hadn't won their conference. And then you're looking at Notre Dame. And so it really comes down to that they beat USC. Maybe they jump and they take that ACC spot. I don't know. But it's something to look at. You can't predict it. There is that possibility out there, though, just with the way things have shaken up with that crazy Syracuse loss. But Matt, you're right. We could be looking at a 2-3 loss conference champion, and it might be across other conferences too. Big 12 is looking in that same way with that big Iowa State loss.
And I think when it comes to football, here's the other thing. Looking at the competitiveness of the ACC, and you have Clemson winning it last year, and you have the Florida State 2013 national championship. I don't know of a way that the ACC, I mean, obviously if Notre Dame wins out and some of these other teams lose between now and then, it's debatable. But I still think, when you look at the conference as a whole, I think that the ACC has warranted themselves as a conference for football that they deserve a seat at the table. They're whoever ends up winning that conference as a Power 5 school. I think they earn a right for one of the seats at the table. We're not. We can compare it to Ohio State that gets in and gets shut out in the playoff system. I mean, the conference as a whole has been well represented in the playoffs the last couple of years. So I think to that end, I think that they should be deserving of a seat. Whether that actually plays out is to be determined as the season rolls on.
Well, I'll use that to segue into the Big Ten talk, get back into that. But I think if that would happen, it could be a doomsday for the playoff, and I think it would most likely expand sooner rather than later. If, let's say, Georgia and Alabama are both undefeated, other conferences, the Big 12 has 2 losses, the ACC has 2-loss champion, like let's say NC State does win, Notre Dame's sitting there with 1 loss. You have Georgia, Alabama, and Notre Dame in, and then take your pick for the other conference winner. That leaves 3 conferences out. You better believe that those commissioners are going to be on the phone, and that playoff will be expanding. Maybe it won't be automatic qualifiers, which I think it should be, but it's going to be something to look at. Now, circling back to the Big Ten, I know we brought up Maryland's injury issues. It's something I'm going to look into. I know that some of their fans have noticed it. It could be their playing surface. It could be the gear they're wearing. I think something similar hit basketball a few years ago, where players' shoes were literally exploding when they made cuts. They were just ripping right out of them, which could be a cause of injury. And if you're having a bunch of guys get hurt, you don't want to see it. And I mentioned it before with like the Purdue locker room thing. I saw a couple actual national pundits come out and say that they weren't too concerned about the comments because the player safety, actually, I think it was Tim Brando. He actually tweeted at Harbaugh and said, I'm not going to take this serious until you release a depth chart, which Harbaugh was like, so you don't care about player safety because you're not going to try to promote Purdue getting air conditioning in their locker room or whatever. And it's something, it's going on 3 weeks now. But when you hear that your quarterback has a broken vertebrae and then you see them go out against Indiana and have the backup quarterback, he's trying his best, but he has 58 passing yards. And you wonder, I know having the stretcher and stuff on the sideline isn't going to have a game injury stopped, but it's kind of like at this point in time with all the technology we have, you should have that technology on your football field. There's no excuse. And if that happens, get out of the Big Ten. Get kicked out. I actually saw, so I'm using this as a segue, I saw an article come out where they're looking at Big Ten enrollment. Colleges, not just the Big Ten, but in the Midwest with their endowment numbers and things. And not only enrollment is dropping, but international applicants are dropping and endowment funds are running out or are much lower compared to other universities. And so this could cause problems later on down the road for these schools. If you're having a school like Purdue who might use their Big Ten money to help bolster some of their academic failings because they can't get students in, then how, I don't see, something's going to push come to shove. Some of these schools might break away from the NCAA. And I've also heard that they're looking into that too, where if the NCAA is not going to punish UNC and there's some other programs that are under sanctions like Louisville, what's to stop these bigger conferences of kind of breaking away from the NCAA and doing their own thing? It wouldn't hurt football. It would make football probably better, but it would hurt basketball and basically kill college basketball. So keep an eye on that whenever you're looking at this. I don't want to talk too much on that stuff, but do your own reading, research that. I think the article I saw was the decline of the Midwestern universities or something like that. I'll try to tweet out a link, but it's an interesting read because it's going to extend into, if you're not having students, look at Indiana's student section over this past weekend when Michigan was there. Empty. The whole end zone was empty. So if you're not having people at the games, how are they going to compete? Not only in football, maybe they start to cut these programs. Why are they just taking Big Ten money if they're not going to reinvest it? That's my problem. So in big time football games, you have Penn State and Michigan this week. I'm not feeling too good about Michigan, Rick. I'll be honest. I think Penn State's finally going to beat them. Michigan just doesn't have an offense. Don Brown defense is awesome. I'll be honest. I feel nervous when our offense is on the field. You know how normally as a fan, you're kind of like, all right, we're on defense. They could score. When our defense is on the field, I'm like, okay, I'm not worried. I can sit back, sip a beer, do whatever. Our offense comes on the field, and I'm thinking, oh, shit, we could throw an interception, and they could score. And that's not a good feeling to be at as a fan. And that's where I'm going to look at. I think Michigan's best course this weekend, I think the line's at 11.5 last I looked. It was up to 12. It jumped to 10. It's been jumping around over a touchdown just because of the offense. And any turnovers in Penn State at night, Michigan's done. Unless O'Korn comes out, because we're on our backup quarterback. He is from Pennsylvania, Huntington, Pennsylvania. He came out in that Purdue game, and he was fired up because Purdue had his old coach at Houston on the staff. So he came out, he was fired up, making all the throws. He was making gestures to the sideline where he would know at the other coach, like, hey, look at me. Maybe he comes out with that fire at Penn State. I don't know. You're kind of at a lose-lose. You can't go to your third-string quarterback at this time. You never start a freshman or a redshirt freshman. I think that's our backup quarterbacks now. You don't start either of them at Beaver Stadium in a whiteout game. That would be career suicide for those guys. So it's kind of ride or die. I think it works out perfectly for Penn State. If Michigan somehow wins this game, I don't know what's going to happen to Franklin. The rumors are already out that Franklin is actually getting offers from other universities, or other universities are preparing to hire him. I watched a press conference where it was brought up. I think the university was Texas A&M. I think that's what I sent you, Rick. So Texas A&M said that, or their boosters were saying that they're preparing a package for James Franklin in the case that Texas A&M ends the season poorly and they have to fire Sumlin. James Franklin didn't say no. He didn't say, I'm staying at Penn State. He didn't say this is my dream job. All he said was, I'm from Pennsylvania. We have the third recruiting class or something. And then he said something about whatever. So I've talked to a couple fans from Penn State. And if you're a fan, feel free to call in. 412-330-1512. Give us a voicemail. I'd like to hear some more thoughts on this instead of just texting some fans or talking to some friends I have that are Penn State fans. But it's concerning that he wouldn't just come straight out and say, I'm not going anywhere. I love it here at Penn State, instead of just kind of deferring the question and saying, hey, I'm from Pennsylvania. Because that's not an answer. And so I've actually seen a lot of fire about that response, and some people even attacking the reporter. Penn State fans were like, why would the reporter even ask that question? Well, it was already pretty much national news. So, Rick, what are your thoughts on that and the game on Saturday?
I think the game on Saturday, I think it's going to be Penn State. I think this defense is the reason why this team is so good. Defense, not the offense, it's the defense. And if Michigan can't score on the defense, there's no way they're going to win. The defense is what's keeping them in games, keeping the score low, has provided shutouts. I think the defense is the key. I don't see Michigan scoring a lot, and I think that's just going to hurt them. Now with the Franklin A&M, Texas A&M rumors, I believe it's kind of a ploy. I don't think he's going anywhere. I think he's using it for a contract extension. I think if he wins Michigan, wins Ohio State, wins Big Ten, big extension in the offseason. That's my personal belief. I think he's trying to use it more as an extension. He's trying to distance himself, but not say, no way in heck, I'm doing it. Distances himself far enough. No, we're not doing it. I'm a Pennsylvania guy. I think he's trying to use it as saying, hey, I want to stay here. Pay me some more money. That's what I think is really happening here. Now, I know you mentioned about enrollments. What's happening in college and in high schools throughout Pennsylvania, Ohio, Wisconsin, New York, Connecticut, Delaware, these states are losing students. They're losing students rapidly in schools, so it's hitting both high schools and colleges. Give you an example, my high school, when I graduated, I was one of 144 students. 10 years later, with one of my first cousins, she graduated, it was 100 students. And now that high school is graduating class is not even going to be in the 90s. So from 2002, it went from 144 to 2012, it went to 100. Now we're in the 80s. So that's 60 students they have lost in that amount of time frame. And that's true throughout the state and other states as well. That's what's affecting this. That's why these colleges are growing. And I think it's affecting most colleges, universities, and even high schools. I mean, one thing I know they're talking about in this area, and it's even happened to me, I've heard that high schools are closing doors, high schools are merging, and it's school boards that are fighting to keep the doors open. I mean, there's one school, I don't even know how they keep the lights on that I know. I'm like, how do they pay the light bill? It's that bad at schools. I mean, it's just hopefully that when your school poverty lines of high schools, especially in the state of Pennsylvania, are so low that the state is actually paying your bills. They're not taking over the schools. They're paying your bills just to keep it on. I know one school that's in Somerset County, the state is paying all the bills right now because of the poverty line. And that school district is 3 times below the poverty line of the United States. That's sad that that's happening in this world, but it's very truthful that that's happening in this world. So I think that's what's affecting a lot of colleges. This area is not growing. And then, this northeast, mid-Atlantic, whatever you want to call this area, is not growing. It's growing in the west. It's growing in the southwest. It's growing in the mid-Atlantic, but it's not growing here.
Yeah, that's depressing. And I'm going to use that to move into some Steeler talk and end the show. I know timing got messed up because we had a little bit of a connection issue. But the only thing I want to touch on for the Steelers NFL, and you guys can talk for as long as you want. It's up to you guys because we're about an hour now, I think. I'm not sure how long the connection issue went for. But the one thing I want to talk about, Steelers got a good win over the Chiefs. It's really the only game that I got to catch tabs on. I actually went up to the beach over on Sunday. So I did a little bit of swimming. It was pretty cold. But I did catch a Steeler game. And the one thing that I definitely wanted to talk about was the hit by Mike Mitchell on Alex Smith. And this is something that's kind of come back. Alex Smith came out and said that he watched it. And when you have two defensive teams like the Chiefs and Steelers, very similar, I kind of felt like the Steelers had an edge. We actually had a member of the Southbound Sports family at the game. So follow us on Instagram, Southbound Sports, and Twitter, and you can see we were sending some live videos, some pictures and stuff out of Arrowhead Stadium. So very cool stuff. We're going to try to get you some more tailgate stuff like that in the future as we follow our boys around and just kind of give some insight on the game. But that hit, he kind of dove at him. I actually had 2 angles. I'm going to retweet some of these. It kind of looked like he was pushed by his own guy, so I'm not sure how much of it was intent. But you can't put yourself in these situations. The Steelers have already had some locker room issues. They've had complaints against them for dirty hits. I know Ryan Shazier, he leads with his helmet. As a fan, I can objectively say he leads with his helmet way more than he should. And that's just bad form. He's going to get himself hurt. You have to learn how to tackle. So it's frustrating whenever I see the Steelers. To me, Steelers are tough, hardworking, not dirty. So I don't want to see anything like this again. And that's my final thought for the week. Anything you guys want to talk about, you guys can talk about other NFL stuff, but I really didn't get to watch too many games. So I hate the guys that talk about sports when you know they don't watch the games, and I don't want to be one of them. So that's my last thoughts for the week. I don't think it was, I don't know if it was intentional, but I hate to see it when it comes from the Steelers. I know other teams have to do that to get an edge, but here, the Steelers, they shouldn't have to do that. So we'll start with you, Matt. Any NFL stuff you want to talk about, or even you can do final thoughts, whatever.
Well, you said about the hit, and I agree. But I think that goes back to it's a reflection of the leadership at the top. And you see these kinds of plays happening over and over again. The latest thing that was coming out now is the rumors that Martavius Bryant is not happy and wants to be traded. He had 2 receptions for 27 yards yesterday, or on Sunday, Antonio Brown had 8 receptions for 155. So if he wants traded, maybe that has something to do with it, with Antonio Brown getting more opportunities to make plays. But here's the thing. If you're Martavius Bryant and you had to sit out the whole year because you couldn't stop smoking pot, shut your mouth. Just shut your mouth and play on the contract that you have. There's no reason that you need to be demanding anything when they had to pay you, or you were not able to contribute to the team because of the stupidity of not until you're out of the league. So I have no sympathy there. It's like it's one more thing to add chaos. It's like Le'Veon Bell finally shuts his mouth and puts together a nice game, and now you got someone else that just – it's like the locker room just seems to be so dysfunctional with there always has to be someone trying to call attention to themselves. Just do it. Just do your job. Do what they signed you, what they hired you, what they're paying you to do. Do your job. That's all we want you to do. Your job is to go out and catch passes. Go do that. So if we can get back to doing that, it would make the games a lot more enjoyable. And that's all I got to say about that.
Rick, what are your thoughts on the Steelers?
I have 2 thoughts. Steelers, you wonder why teams have problems and teams don't. You wonder why teams are in the playoffs all the time, and then you wonder why, some teams aren't. You look at the Steelers, you're already having internal chaos. This is my theory when I kept hearing this when Bryant was asking, why don't I ever hear Danny Amendola bellyache? There's like 3 running backs in New England. White, Gillespie, and Lewis. Why doesn't one of them ever complain? It's like you never hear them complain. I remember I was watching the Patriots game and they said they liked Cooks because he wasn't a drama queen, and that's why they traded for him, because they said he's not your typical receiver. And I'm like, that fits New England. We're just going to play. We're going to try our best. We got a game plan, and we go with it. And that's what I love about New England. I'm not a New England fan. I'm not a New England hater. But I understand why they're constantly good and why they're constantly in the playoffs, because they just play. And I think this goes into my other point. Point number 2 is you wonder why, and I know I'm not going to get started in certain crap. I'm going to talk about ratings, but I'm going to take it on a different way. You make stars and you put them in commercials, and Rodgers is hurt, done for a good part of the season. Beckham is done for your season, and Andrew Luck hasn't even thrown a pass. And then you have Gronk, who's constantly in and out of the lineup, and J.J. Watt, who looks like he's done for the season. So your guys that you're seeing in NFL commercials, you're going to say, I want to turn and watch J.J. Watt. Well, it's not happening this year. I want to watch Beckham. It ain't happening this year. The problem is when you key around 5 guys and kind of build your league and put all these guys in commercials, they're all gone right now. You're going to turn on the TV and not see one of them next week in a football uniform. And I think this is going to be something that I know is not being talked about when you have your mega stars are not being seen. And then you hear the Steelers debacles about all their belly aching. Do you really want to turn on and watch an NFL game? And the Patriots aren't doing that good this year. And your best team is Kansas City Chiefs. And until this Sunday, I couldn't name 6 guys on their starting offense and 6 guys on their starting defense. It's just a bunch of no-name guys. And the guys I could name are injured. Eric Berry, I could tell you his name, but he's injured for the season. So, it's like, it's tough. That's my point. I'm done.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, whenever you're marketing all these things, and it's kind of similar to what it just happened tonight for the Celtics. They rebranded. They brought in a bunch of new guys. Gordon Hayward lands awkwardly. First game, breaks his leg. Now, what's their identity? Whenever you're living in a league of superstars, and I don't know if the NFL is following suit of what the NBA did or other teams, but you're looking at a league that there's no excitement. For me, when the Steelers aren't playing, there's no reason for me to turn the game on. I'll watch Carolina because I lived on here and trying to see what they are. They're in a different league than the Steelers. So no overlap there, really. They would only really meet in the playoffs if they were met in the Super Bowl. But other than that, these games, like last night's Monday night game, it was Tennessee versus, was it the Colts?
Giants,
whatever. Like, it doesn't even matter. Like, I tried to watch the game, and it was bad. So it was a boring half. Like, I don't think either team had above 500 record. They might be 3-3 now or whatever. So, yeah, there's problems. But I don't know. Any other points by you guys before we wrap it up here?
You hit the last one that I was thinking about. Was just, I hope that he has a good recovery, and that whatever, for as bad as the images and things that are being posted online right now, hopefully the injury isn't as bad as what it looks, but it definitely looks like he's definitely going to be out for a long time.
Yeah, and this was something that I wanted to bring up because, yeah, that image is pretty disturbing. But I watched the NC State Louisville game 2 weeks ago, and I'm kind of giving you a little bit of bonus content here because I don't know if the stream worked on Periscope again, so I apologize. If you watch on Periscope, it looks like we have a viewer on now. To my end, it looks like the stream froze again, so I don't know. You can get the full episode. If you're listening to the audio, make sure you download it on Stitcher, iTunes, Google Play, TuneIn Radio. Go to our YouTube if you want to see the full video. I'm going to link it on Twitter as soon as this is over just to make sure that it's not working. And we might have to investigate other platforms. But I'll go, because I'm not sure. The timer kind of stopped on me, so I lost all my bearings on this show. So I apologize as a host if we're going long or if we end up. I think we're definitely not going to go short. I think we went over. But my last point is going to be that I watched the Louisville game. Louisville running back, it was during the 2-minute drill. He falls awkwardly, breaks his arm. At least I think it was a broken arm. I don't know if it was the upper arm or lower arm. ESPN says, ooh, yeah, he's out. The fans are booing, but they don't know that he broke his arm. And the commentator's like, we're not going to show it. It's a disturbing image. Next thing you know, ESPN starts to show the image. They're showing the play over and over. And the commentator's like, I guess we are showing the image. And he's kind of backtracking. And to me, it's kind of like, don't show that. Kids could be watching this. Kids don't want to see someone's arm shatter. And this is another leg thing. I don't watch the Celtics game, but I know if I go on social media, I'm going to see it. I'm going to see it. There's no way around it. Another image that I saw was this weekend. Bradley Chubb, NC State's best player, had his finger get caught in a pit helmet. Dislocated it. Disgusting. You know how many times I saw that? Hundreds. Thousands on Twitter. Like, you can't even log in at this point. So if you're a television network, don't show that. You want people to watch the game. It's not some kind of weird gladiator games where you're showing injuries. It just seems tacky. And especially whenever your commentator saying, we're not going to show that, that's too disturbing. And then you go ahead and just hang them out to dry by showing it anyway. In bad taste. I think it was ESPN doing that game. I don't know. But it was bad. So we'll end it on that. Again, I apologize if there's any issues. I'm going to try to do some tests. I might rule out some other segments. I tried to do it before college football season started, kind of like a tailgate type show. But I'm trying to get some things rolling. Some of the stuff didn't go through the legal process yet of naming and things like that. So I'm kind of trying to get some other ideas together. But I'll use that as a platform to kind of test streaming options. If Periscope's going to freeze on us, I don't know if it's my new location. I need to run some new cables and stuff. I haven't got to that yet. I figured Wi-Fi would work. I've used it in the past. Don't know why we're dropping out. Skype seemed to freeze today. I don't know if that's the issue. But we'll be looking into it. Thanks for your patience. Subscribe, follow us. If you have any feedback, please send it to us. Give us some hot takes. Give us some content. If you have, or if you like our content and some of the stuff we're saying, especially like some of the stuff, like the insider stuff on like the Penn State game, Franklin leaving, give us some feedback. I'd love to hear from the fans. So thanks for listening, and we'll see you guys next week.